Talisker, beautiful deep amber. That's a first refill American bourbon cask.
Okay.
For those of you who don't know your wood regimen, ASB, American Standard Barrel, that gets American whiskey, usually bourbon, or Tennessee whiskey in it, brand new, fresh. The whiskey is generally in there for 4 years or so. Then it goes to Scotland. It gets rebuilt as a hogshead or hoggy. They add a few more staves so that you get more liquid to wood ratio.
Mm-hmm.
And then they fill that with generally corn spirit, just like it had in the United States, for blending in blended whiskeys, Johnny Walker, for instance. Then they take that hoggy. It's been a little bit worn out now. It's had 4 years of bourbon, 12 years of corn whiskey, and it goes to Talisker, and they put the malt in it, and it gets that much color. Is that the right one? Yes. And it gets that much color, and a lot more wood. Now we go to Caol Ila. Caol Ila gets that's almost white,
yeah,
almost blonde.
It's quite paler.
It's very pale because Billy Stitchell, who makes Caol Ila,
mm-hmm.
Billy is very, if you go to Caol Ila, first thing he'll do is he'll pull out some white stuff, some spike. We call it white dog, they call it spike there, new make. And he'll make you taste it. It's delicious. It's Spike McClure, of course. That's a whole other story, I'll tell you. But you'll notice in this big modern still house, now you've walked around outside. I didn't finish that story. You walked around outside, there are no worm tubs outside. So right off the bat, you know you've got condensers inside. Mm-hmm. And you go inside, you see these big, big, beautiful stills. Caol Ila is a big producer. And they have a big, big columns that they run their steam through condensers. And they produce a very light, very smoky, sweet, smoky, fresh, smoky,
very fresh
spirit. Very, very fresh new make. And he loves it so much. If Billy Stitchell could sell you that white stuff, he would. But it's not whiskey unless it's been in a cask. So he gets exhausted. Not first refill, second, but third, fourth refill casks.
All right.
Casks with very little to give as far as tannin, mm-hmm. as far as lignin, as far as all these other elements that just let that spirit mature without getting woody. Mm-hmm. He wants to keep as much of that still house in the bottle as possible. When you taste Caol Ila, you're tasting the still house. Mm. Absolutely. Very fresh nose.
It's funny how, of course, there is some smoky note here.
Bigger smoky note than Talisker.
Yeah.
Bigger, more present.
It's grassy on top of being a bit lemony.
And I would call it fresh cut mm-hmm, grass. Mm-hmm. Trimming the grass, my old grandfather would say. Trimming the grass. It's fresh, not dry grass, not hay.
Before dinner, smoky single malt here?
Yes. I would say this before dinner because it's a light. Mm-hmm. It's a light spirit. It will, well, as soon as you taste this, you're just going to start really salivating. Everything's going to get ready on your palate. You're going to be ready to go.
But when you move on to the 18-year-old, is it just the same thing with an extra 6 years on the maturation, or is there a different wood regime?
It's a heavier cask, and you will look at it immediately. You will pick up that there's a lot more. There's more than 6 years wood in this. They've picked a different set of casks mm-hmm. for maturation here. Mm-hmm. More active casks. For this 12-year-old, they picked barely active casks. That has been the intention of the distiller. Mm. And what I like is very few Scotch distillers do this. Mm-hmm. Wood has been, they've really shown off their heavy wood for a long, long time now, and their special wood active. This is all still. Wow, so grassy, lemony.
You have to be more careful when you distill.
Iodine too.
When you distill, you have to be so careful making a very clean, the right spirit, because the wood will not impart too much.
Listen, my rule on this is, don't get me wrong, it isn't that Billy is being particularly more artful than, say, Charlie Smith was in making this Talisker. Mm. To get that Talisker to be that, his new make has to be just as specifically perfect as Charlie's does to be this lightly changed one. Mm-hmm. You can't make more mistakes in the distillate and expect the wood to fix it and come out with Talisker. See what I mean?
All right.
It's got to be, but to get this, you have to get a very fresh spirit because
Well,
it's not going to change a
Some
lot.
people say, use a lot of that first fill ex sherry butt, and that will mask
Well,
the lack of perfection in
European oak is so much more dynamic. It will do a lot of things. And we'll talk, well, we're going to get, are we going to taste this Lagavulin?
We should.
We should taste them all because we're going to taste some sherry butt
right.
here and you'll get that. Let's taste
Okay.
this then now. Oh.
I need oysters. When it comes to Lagavulin, what's the deal?
Lagavulin has a very special wood regimen that not very many distilleries do for their regular bottling, for their first bottling. One, Talisker does 16 years in wood for its standard offering. So that's a pretty long time for your, 12 is not their regular, 10 is not their regular, 16 is their regular. That's their normal first offering. There are some great young ones, but the 16 is what they consider to be their most typical expression of the distillery. Two, they use first refill bourbon casks, and they use sherry butts from Spain, European oak, Oloroso sherry butts, for 50% of the spirit. So 50% first refill bourbon hogsheads,
Right.
50% Oloroso sherry European wood oak for 50%. Then they marry those when they bottle. And nothing tastes like Lagavulin. Nothing.
So,
First, look
when
at that
you talk-
color.
when
That's
you talk
amber.
about Lagavulin, what does it mean?
Lagavulin, the king of the Islas, the big guy. Now, we all know the other. Most of you probably don't know Kalila. That's an Isla whiskey. But you probably know Lafroig well. You probably know Ardbeg well. You probably know Bowmore and Bruichladdich well. There are a bunch of distilleries.
And wonderful ones.
Bunnahabhain, all these really lovely distilleries. Isla, let's face it, small island, many distilleries, happy people. Elix, they're a great. You notice how they always
Wonderful.
smile and wave at you?
Right.
The Isla wave?
Right. Even the sheep. That's a lot of sheep.
Okay,
there.
first off, look at that color, Flavian. That is deep
Gorgeous.
amber. Whenever you see that color, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to European oak sherry cask. Probably sherry cask. You get that because this is a sappy, denser wood, and it has a lot of activity. You can kill a whiskey if you leave it too long in an active sherry cask. And I've tasted.
So don't do this at home.
Don't do this at home. But if you use your sherry cask judiciously, you can get this.
And still lots of apples, lots of great fresh aromas.
Beautiful. Appley is a very good note. I also get a woody. I get a cedar box, cigar box.
Ooh.
Salty, briny. Oh boy, that's really nice.
Well, what's different with the stills there? You're talking about how different it is at Talisker versus Kalila. What about Lagavulin?
Lagavulin is, again, right by the sea. Lagavulin has big, beautiful old still house. It is most definitely not of the mid-Soviet style. It is built in the old fashion. Lagavulin has a lot of copper contact, but they run very hard. So they do get a meaty spirit when it comes off. So that, again, run that thing hard, you will still get that meaty spirit. They very specifically use this wood regimen, and 16 years. Remember that. You could produce the most sulfurous spirit in the world, but if you put it in the right casks, it can come out anywhere from rich broth to jam. We're not doing the whiskey today, but Mortlach produces a very sulfurous spirit, and it comes out, that comes out jammy.
It's lovely.
You can spread that on toast. I mean, it's just unbelievably fruity and rich. But that comes from a very sulfury spirit. So Lagavulin, well, let's taste what comes here. One, beautiful smoke.
Yeah.
That's like somebody smoking a very nice cigar in the next room.
You need to eat with this spirit. This is a wonderfully friendly, food-friendly
Very
spirit.
fruit-friendly. First choice for all of you who can abide blue cheese, and particularly very ripe blue cheese, which I adore. And it doesn't matter if it's Stilton or Gorgonzola or whatever your favorite, just a good heavy blue with this, wow. Wow, it's my favorite food pairing to introduce people to with a whiskey is Lagavulin and a very ripe blue cheese. Invariably, they say, wow, or oh my, or something.
Lagavulin 12 is not a standard release.
No. It's delicious.
But beware.
Wow.
It comes at cask strength.
And bright, very bright, almost as light as the Kalila. Some very light casks.
Is there any
It's
difference
not
in the
it's not
maturation?
the same. It's very different from the 16. This is not your typical 16-year-old 50-50. You just look at the color. The first thing you'll see is this is a lot of bourbon cask. This is not a lot of sherry. This is less active casks, considerably less active casks. It will make you sit up very straight in your chair and say, whiskey. I mean, it is a much stricter critter.
What about Lagavulin 30?
Oh my gosh. Now, remember, Lagavulin, these big heavy island whiskeys mature very well and get old very gracefully. Lagavulin 30 is a cask strength and sits at 30 years old, it's mid-50s ABV still. It's still hanging in there. It has big smoke. The smoke has intensified. It's not overpowering. It's not a Lafroig or an Ardbeg. But for Lagavulin, the smoke has gotten denser. It's a very rich, jammy, cooked fruit.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
mouthfeel.
Can we get some here?
Chewy. Oh, you're getting into that. Oh, you're begging for it. You're not asking me about to explain it to you.
Yeah, because every once in a while we can get some, but...
All right, let me explain something about allocated whiskeys, about small release whiskeys. One, there's not very much of them. Generally, when we do bottlings of 30-year-olds, it's from a few dozen casks. There aren't that many of them. And you'll notice on the bottle it'll say 3,000 bottles or 2,000 bottles. That's for the whole world. That's not for Brandy Library. That's not for New York. That's not for the East Coast of the United States. That's not for North America. It's for the whole world. And guess what, folks? China has discovered single malt.